Well, today, on the Sunday after Christmas, we always celebrate the feast of the Holy Family of Saint Joseph, Mary, and of course, Jesus. And this is a great day to speak about marriage and family life because, as St. John Paul II told us, the Holy Family is the icon and model of every human family. An icon is something that you contemplate, and a model is, of course, something that you imitate. And so the Holy Family is a good thing for us to think about and to imitate. And this year, I would like to speak a little bit about some of the recent events that have happened in the church just before Christmas with a new document that was given about blessings. It's called Fiducia, Supplicans. And many people have asked me about this, including some of the Protestant pastors here in town. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to speak about that. And of course, as with anything, there's like three levels here. There's what we hear in the news on the headlines, there's what the document says, and then of course what people are going to do with the document. And there's a lot of really good things that are said in there very clearly, but there are some things that are a little unclear, and so we need to await further clarification. And so I think we should treat it like this. Imagine if you went to school one day and the teacher said to you, "Okay, kids, 2 plus 2 equals 4, and she said, here's 2 apples, 1, 2, 3, 4 apples. And you're like, that makes perfect sense. Then you go to lunch, you come back, and she says, I would like to clarify something I said earlier. And then she goes on for 20 minutes or so trying to clarify what she said, but it didn't exactly help, and then so you go out to recess, and one of your friends is like, did the teacher tell us that sometimes 2 plus 2 can equal 5? And you're like, well, it kind of sounded like that, but also, why would she say that if she said something different in the morning? So let's just hold on to that and see what she says in the future. And that's what we ought to do with all these things. We should understand everything in the light of what we've always been taught. And if there's something that's going to be clarified, we will await clarification on those things. And it's important that we are patient because the church doesn't think in months and years, rather in decades and in centuries. The church has been here 21 centuries. So I just want to recall 3 areas in which we should try to hold fast to and live out. The first one is the definition of marriage. And this is something that's really important today because there are really 2 ideas about what marriage is, and they're competing. There's the modern one that the world gives us in the last 30 or 40 years, which goes like this. A marriage is a legal contract between 2 people for the sake of romantic love. And that's what people believe. But what the church has always taught and will always teach is something a little bit different. The church teaches that marriage is a lifelong communion between a man and a woman established by their free consent for the sake of the generation and education of children. And so you can see that these 2 definitions don't exactly match up, and so that's why there's a lot of conflict in people's minds. They're like, why doesn't the church let 2 people that love each other marry? Well, it's because we have a certain definition of marriage, and the definition holds together very well. If I were to define something else, for example, like a knife, we'd say a knife is for cutting. A knife is for the sake of cutting. And then you immediately know that it has to be hard and it has to be sharp. And so it is with our definition of marriage. When we say marriage is for the generation of children, we know it has to be between a man and a woman. And if we say that marriage is for the education of children, we know that it has to be a lifelong communion, because education doesn't just end when a child is 18 or 21 or anything like that. It continues as long as the parents are still living. And so this is really important. This is what the document says, in fact, and it's what we should hold to, because if we don't do this, it kind of disrupts everything. The Bible, as you may know, starts with the marriage of Adam and Eve, and it ends with the marriage of Christ and the church, and all the way through, it's all about marriage. So if you were to change the definition of marriage, it would completely unzip the Bible. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the document speaks about couples that are in irregular situations, which would include like people that live together before marriage, those who are married outside of the church, those who are divorced and remarry without an annulment. But it also speaks about same-sex couples. And so I want to speak about what the church teaches about homosexuality, because it's very important that we are clear on this and that we are able to articulate it very well. And so the church, and we have to be sensitive and compassionate, of course, because we all know people or have family members or friends, or maybe we ourselves experience same-sex attraction. And so we want to be very, charitable about this. The church has three different things that it distinguishes: the person, the inclination, and the action. And so the person, like with every human person, deserves to be loved. And the Catechism says they should be respected, they should be treated with compassion and sensitivity. It says that a lot of times this is a cross in people's life. It brings with it a lot of emotional pain. And so they shouldn't face discrimination. Also, that they are called, like the rest of us, to chastity according to our state in life. And like everyone, they are also called to be saints, called to holiness, called to perfection, called to unite their life with Jesus and to receive his peace and grace and uniformity with God's will. And so that's really important. And if in the past we've not been good about loving people, then we need to change. As St. Paul told us in our second reading today, over all these things, put on love. That is the bond of perfection. The second, the inclination, the Catechism says, is objectively disordered, which means that it's a strong attraction to something that's morally wrong. It's not a sin to feel attracted to someone. We know this because married men and married women at times feel attracted to someone other than their spouse. That's not a sin. It's just a matter of how we act upon that is important. Another example we could give perhaps is a person who suffers from alcohol addiction. This is a very strong inclination towards something that's wrong, abusing alcohol, and so they have to be very careful about that. And so these things come from original sin. That's where they come from. And then finally, the actions. The church has always taught, based on the scriptures and natural law, that it is that sexual acts between two people of the same sex is always morally wrong, or they use the word intrinsically disordered, and that means that they can never be approved of. And so if anybody tells you that the Bible is okay with these things, or that the church is going to change their teaching on this, they're just being dishonest. And so the final area is about blessings. And this is an area where we can just use some, what we might call Catholic common sense. So imagine if a group of thieves came to town and they came to the church first and they're like, "Hey, Father, we're going to go out stealing. Can you give us a blessing that we're successful?" I'm like, "Sorry, fellas, not going to happen. Come back if you want to change your life." And if they did, they said, "Actually, we want to change. We don't want to live this lifestyle anymore." "Okay, great. I'll give you a blessing. You can line up and go to confession," all of that. But if one of those individual thieves came on his birthday and said, "Father, today's my birthday. Would you give me a blessing that, I can respond to God's will?" Of course, man. But if someone came and said, "Hey, Father, can you bless this knife that I'm going to hold people at knife point with?" They're like, "No, that's not going to work." Obviously, these things are clear for us. The document has a little ambiguity there, and that's why we need some clarification. But for the time being, we're just going to stick with the church has always done, understanding that God blesses sinful people, because we're all sinful people, but he does not bless sin. And so this is what we should hold to. And the bishop has given some clarification about this too. He says we need to be very careful that we don't give any semblance of approving things that are wrong, and at the same time, we need to accompany and love people and work with them in their situation and bring them to the gospel. Right? This is why the church exists, to continue the work of Jesus. What did Jesus do? He loved people. He called them to conversion. Go and sin no more. That's what the church does. We're in the business of believing that people can change. The church exists to help people to become saints, to grow, to get to heaven. And so that's what we ought to do. And so my final thing is we should all strive to understand and to believe and to hold and teach what the church, in fact, teaches about marriage and family life. It's very important, and people deserve it. They deserve to know this truth. And it will be difficult. There's very powerful forces that don't like this teaching and try to undermine it at every step. And we also know that Sister Lucia, who was one of the children at Fatima that Mary appeared to, she became a religious sister later in life. And she told this cardinal once, she said, the final battle that the kingdom of Satan wants to engage in against the Lord is about marriage and family life. And she says, if you fight on behalf of the Lord, you'll always be contradicted, but don't worry, because in the end, the Lord is triumphant. And that's what Jesus taught us too. On the night before his crucifixion, he said, in the world you will have trouble, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. And so I hope that we can have some clarity on these issues, and that we can, in our own lives, in our families, continue to hold and pass these beliefs along.